Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Yesterday on the show, we left you with a clip. As much as it pains me to hear her voice again, I'm certain we'll be hearing a lot more from Hillary Rodham Clinton, not just over the next few months and as the campaign rolls on, but afterwards too. Regardless of how the election goes, the Hillary Clinton machine will be working behind the scenes. She's admitted as much herself. Her former campaign manager, John Podesta, her director of communications, Jennifer Palmieri, her policy advisors like Jake Sullivan are all active right now, working not to elect Joe Biden, as you might assume Democratic operatives are all doing at the moment, but rather the Clinton machine is hard at work trying to undermine the results of the upcoming presidential election, and they'll spare no expense. Clinton was interviewed by her own comm staffer, Palmieri, for The Circus, a lightweight political show on the Showtime network. During the interview, Clinton made a pretty stunning and chilling remark. It was about accepting the results of the 2020 election. Advice to Joe Biden? Don't do it. Don't accept the result. Don't continue the centuries-long American political tradition of a peaceful transition to or back to power. Throw the rule book out the window, throw the nation into disarray, weaken America, weaken its political system, call into question the institutions such as the Electoral College that have held mob rule at bay throughout the nation's history. Directly assault the U.S. Constitution and the will of the people. Let's remind ourselves of what Mrs. Clinton, the former Secretary of State, said. Let's roll that clip.
Legal operation, and I know the Biden campaign is working on that. We have to have poll workers, and I urge people who are able to be a poll worker. We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places. This is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, you know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side is.
These are her words. Do not concede under any circumstances. Team Clinton is fighting a surreptitious grudge match against Donald Trump, and they intend to assault the traditions of this nation to do so. Antifa and their allies are closely on hand to help them, and I'll get into that in a second. But Clinton's modus operandi here is plain for all to see, as the U.S. foreign policy establishment has waged war on elected leaders and democratic legitimacy around the world, like they did in Ukraine. They now intend to do the same thing here in the United States. A color revolution for America. Except this time the administration isn't a dictatorship, it isn't illegitimate, and there won't be any proof of ballot box tampering or opponent intimidation, not from the Republican side at least. Nonetheless, the Democratic Party of America is conspiring to reject the election results and throw this country into a kind of chaos that will make Portland look like a playpen. They're warming up already from the Chaz zone to Kenosha, Wisconsin. We can see the tactics they intend to use. Why do we see the scenes we see outside federal courthouses every night? Because those same iconic courthouses up and down the country, those are where the decisions over ballots and election victories will be taken. Democrats are hoping to show the world that President Trump is a dictator who refuses to be removed from power, even if he wins. They'll air images from around the courthouses of America, and they'll liken it to scenes from Hong Kong or Belarus. Why do you think they're showing you all those scenes from Belarus right now? To tee up a coup, or should I say, another coup. And it isn't just Clinton who said the quiet part out loud. Her campaign chief, John Podesta, played Joe Biden in a recent war game hosted by the Open Society Foundations and the Berggruen Institute. We'll get into that in the final segment on today's show with our senior reporter at the National Pulse, Natalie Winters. They billed that war game as bipartisan, but the only people from the Republican side were never Trumpers, like Bill Kristol and Michael Steele, who will lend credibility to the idea that Trump should be removed regardless of who wins the election fairly. Between the mail-in ballots, the pandemic shutdowns, the riots, and now this open refusal to accept the results under any circumstances, Democrats are setting up America for a civil war. No wonder they wanted the police neutered and defunded so quickly. They want lawlessness. They want carnage. They want America to be turned into a socialist banana republic, because then and only then can the left force Donald Trump from power and impose totalitarian measures upon the public. Measures like taking your guns away. Look at how they treated Mark and Patricia McCloskey, and look how the media lies about them and what happened to them to this very day. Meanwhile, people who vote Democrat all around the country appear to be waking up to the new tyranny of the left. I want to play you some call-in clips from C-SPAN last night of Democrats who watched the Republican National Convention on day 2 and what they had to say as a result of it. Let's roll these clips.
I'm a Democrat, and our convention last week is no comparison to what I've seen in just the last 2 nights.
What do you mean?
I'm from Minnesota, where all these riots and looting and the burning started, and I mean, not a mention about us last week, about saving our communities, helping our homeless, rebuilding our businesses, and this convention just in the last 2 nights has awakened me that there is hope, that there are people that are willing to fight for us people in our communities.
Barb, are you in the Twin Cities area or outside?
In the Twin Cities,
and
right outside the Twin Cities.
Has some of the protests, have they frightened you?
Oh, absolutely. They've been, 7 miles away with a new John Johnson of our party going into a neighborhood with 200 of Black Lives Matter supporters and terrorizing innocent neighbors in a community. It is scary.
What did you think of Melania Trump's speech?
I thought it was wonderful. I come from a long line of Democrats, but I have to say I switched parties because I'm so impressed by what our president did. And tonight's, the whole RNC was wonderful. I think Democrats really have to take a look at what has happened to them, how they switched their focus, how they don't stand up for what the American people really stand for. And Melania and everyone who spoke tonight were just excellent. They spoke what the real true Americans are.
Helen, who did you vote for in 2016?
Well, I didn't vote for Trump, but I am now, most definitely. The riots that's going on, what's happening in California and all these countries, all these states and cities, it's just, is that what we really want? I don't think so. It's amazing how the Democratic Party has changed, and the Republican Party and Donald Trump is the one who's going to take this country and make it better, like he said. And I'm just so impressed.
Tonight, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm from Lorain, Ohio, which is a Democrat city in Ohio. And I just want to say, after watching the convention tonight on TV, on C-SPAN here, I am definitely changing my vote to Republican. And I'll tell you what, they just put the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to shame. I'm going to follow the Republican Party now.
But why? What was it that convinced you about tonight?
It was the heartfelt way they came across to the American people, and I was really touched by the number of times they used the word God. They put God into everything, and the people on the Democratic side on their convention act like they were pushing God right out of it. And that had a lot to do with changing my mind.
Incredible. And there you have it, or at least some of it. I know there's a lot to play there, but I wanted to bring you all of that. There are even more. But it's not enough to rely on some Democrats to wake up in time for November to flip their votes. Republicans need to get their heads around this nightmare scenario that's unfolding right now. Biden, Clinton, and the gang will march the Open Society Foundation's experts in front of Congress one day after the election, and they'll refuse to accept the result. They'll say these are the election experts. They know what they're talking about. They'll claim every victimhood status under the sun, and they'll lie, cheat, and steal to drag the process on beyond Inauguration Day. Because if they do, they know it'll come down to one thing: whether or not the Republican establishment wants to fight to the death for the White House. And given how some of the Republicans in Washington, D.C. operate, do you really trust them to stick it out alongside this president? I don't. On today's show, we have Jerome Riviere. He's a member of the European Parliament from France, and he'll be telling us about the assaults on the will of the people from the political establishment over in Europe, and how he's seen so much of the violence in America before. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back.